Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show across the state of Georgia. The phone number, if you want to be a part of the program today, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. In the words of Wolf Blitzer at CNN, historic day. The Democrats have issued articles of impeachment against the President of the United States, in part because of the president's supposed cheating in the election in 2016, which, of course, he didn't actually do, and the Mueller report thoroughly debunked. But to set the stage here, before we take your phone calls, here's Adam Schiff announcing why they don't want to wait any further for further witnesses, why they don't want courts to get involved in authorizing witnesses to come.
For one court decision. If it takes us another 8 months to get a second court or maybe a Supreme Court decision, people need to understand that is not the end of the process. It comes back to us and we ask questions because he no longer has absolute immunity, and then he claims something else, that his answers are privileged, and we have to go back to court for another 8 or 16 months. The argument, why don't you just wait, amounts to this. Why don't you just let him cheat in one more election? Why not let him cheat just one more time? Why not let him have foreign help just one more time? That is what that argument for.
Okay, so essentially the Mueller report said that the Trump campaign did not coordinate with the Russians in 2016. The Russians did want to disrupt the American electoral process, but the Trump campaign did not coordinate with them. Here comes Adam Schiff saying, why don't you just let him cheat in one more election? Why not let him cheat one more time? Why not have foreign help just one more time? That presumes then that Adam Schiff believes President Trump did cheat in 2016 and did coordinate with the Russians, though the Mueller investigation is clear that he did not. The Russians certainly did want to undermine the election, and by the end of the election, certainly wanted to hurt Hillary Clinton and help Donald Trump. But there's no evidence the Russians rigged the election. There's no evidence they stole the election. There's no evidence that the Trump campaign coordinated with them. What there is evidence of is Hillary Clinton was a crummy candidate who didn't go to Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, like her husband told her to, and lost herself the election. Had she gone to those states, she might have been able to pull it off. So essentially, the Democrats are admitting they are impeaching the President of the United States for a mythology from 2016. That's why they're impeaching him. Doug Collins was on with Fox News here just a few moments ago. I grabbed the audio while we were in commercial break.
That's the allegation. Number 2, obstruction of Congress. He is not above the law, says Chairman Nadler. Back to Doug Collins. You were listening, and your reaction now, sir, on the Republican side.
Well, it's just amazing. I saw nothing, but it's very telling that they all walked off stage and didn't answer a question. That, to me, is really telling. Why would the Speaker of the House, you just announced articles of impeachment. You had your 5 committee chairs. You had Adam Schiff. You had Jerry Nadler. And they wouldn't take questions? I mean, that tells me that they're really not inherently comfortable with what they're doing, and I think this is the problem that we have. Adam Schiff has heard his own voice for so long, he simply believes what he's saying without any evidence of truth or any evidence of facts here. They simply want to get the clock in the calendar because they are so obsessed and so fearful that President Trump is going to win again next November that they don't even perceive the problems that they have. Again, it's very telling to me. Mueller didn't come up, neither did the fact of the quid pro quo bribery, all the focus group problems that they've had in the last little bit. They went with abuse of power, which they can define.
What does that tell you, sir?
It tells me they have no case. It tells me that they tried everything they could, so they had to come up with the 2 amorphous things that they could come up with.
It might be,
one
but they have the votes.
Well, we've known that. That's not a shock, Bill. We've had that since November last year. Again, I talked about it yesterday. Means, motive, and opportunity. The opportunity came when they won the election last November. This has been a foregone conclusion since November of last year. Don't make any mistake about that they were, as soon as they had the majority, they were going to do this. And they tried everything possible. We went from Whitaker. We went from Kavanaugh. We went to Mueller. Remember, my chairman who ran to be chairman saying, I'm the best to handle impeachment in November of last year. And his first 2 things is he was overheard saying, I'm going to impeach the president and Kavanaugh. I mean, this is a man who is obsessed with not serving the public or defending his oath of office. He's obsessed with impeaching the president, and he's drug everybody else with him.
One more question here. Adam Schiff said we could go to...
No. We'll leave it there. That was Doug Collins. Now, to the phones, 877-97-Eric, 877-973-7425. Jimmy, you're going to be up first. Welcome.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good. I had a quick question for you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand why nobody on the Republican side, at least that I've not seen, have asked the Democrats, why don't you want to find out if there's something going on with Biden?
Well,
Is there a
okay.
problem there?
You know, I'm glad you raised this issue, Jimmy. Did you know yesterday, Doug Collins, a congressman from here in Georgia, began that discussion on the while the Democrats were arguing over articles of impeachment, raised that issue, and ABC, CBS, and NBC, all of which were covering the hearing live, left and went to commercial break when Doug Collins began talking about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. And the Democrats, of course, want nothing to do with talking about the Bidens. I got to tell you, I really do think that Biden is the Democratic nominee at this point. The other Democrats are too divided, and this issue is going to come back to get him in 2020. Biden is having to come out now and say that Hunter Biden is going to do nothing internationally while his dad is in the White House. And how can his dad enforce that? I have no idea. Thanks very much for the phone call, Jimmy. In fact, here's the PBS had a panel of reporters, not pundits, but the panel of reporters on PBS last night. Listen to this.
Mika, I think, is onto something. The Republicans have not yet been able to get to their arguments, but wait, it's coming after the break. The familiar refrains about the aid was actually delivered, that President Trump had a tougher policy than did President Obama. Hearsay and all the other arguments about corruption that have become so familiar. I also think that while it may not have been illegal or even inappropriate, perhaps, for Hunter Biden to have been taking a monthly retainer from Burisma, I do think that sort of clouds the atmosphere of whether it was proper for President Trump to inquire about corruption. I think that is something that is sort of stuck out as I've sort of talked to people outside of Washington and the rest, and it's a simple fact that people don't quite understand. I even heard Vice President Biden sort of struggling to answer that question in an interview on HBO last night. So that sort of hangs out there, and I think makes things that much more difficult for the Democrats to make their case.
It does make it more difficult for the Democrats to make their case. They're going to have a hard time. The Democratic Party out there is going to struggle to answer the questions about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, in large part because Joe Biden himself has struggled about these things. This is you heard the reporter on Axios or on PBS mention the Axios interview with Joe Biden. Let me play you some of this audio from Joe Biden discussing with Mike Allen of Politico, he used to be with Politico, of Axios on HBO. Joe Biden discussing the Hunter Biden situation. He didn't handle it well.
On your son, Hunter Biden, President Trump says, Sleepy Joe has real problems. Reminds me of Crooked Hillary and her 33,000 deleted emails. A lot of the Ukraine charges about you have been debunked and were unfair. There's one thing that a lot of Democrats even do wonder about, and that is Hunter Biden, your son, was getting paid a lot of money to serve on the board of a Ukrainian energy company facing serious corruption charges. You were the vice president running point on Ukraine. The average Joe hears that and says, that sounds fishy. What's your understanding of what your son was doing for an extraordinary amount of money?
I don't know what he was doing. I know he was on the board. I found out he was on the board after he was on the board, and that was it. And there's nobody...
Well, you've had a lot of time. Isn't this something you want to get to the bottom of?
No, because I trust my son.
But that doesn't pass the smell test. Like when you're vice president, isn't there a higher standard? Don't you need to know what's happening with your family? Don't you need to put down some guardrails? Unless there was something that was, there was something on its face that was wrong. There's nothing on its face that was wrong. So look, if you want to talk about problems, let's talk about Trump's family. I mean, come on. This is... These guys are amazing. So you think that everything that happened was kosher?
You know there's not one single bit of evidence. Not one.
Biden is pointing his
anything done with
hand towards Mike Allen.
You know that, but you keep asking me these questions. It's okay. You're doing what you have to do, but I'm not worried about it. Look, the American public knows me.
Last one on this. Say you're elected, you're in office. What guardrails would you have to be sure that your son, your brother Jimmy, doesn't do anything to trade on the family name?
They will not be engaged in any foreign business because of what's happened in this administration. No one's going to be seeking patents for things from China. No one's going to be engaged in that kind of thing.
So no foreign business for your
Correct.
relatives in office.
That was Axios interviewing Joe Biden. Here's okay. I realize I will be accused of being a partisan when I say this, despite, well, I'm in the fun position of hating them all these days. All of them. Just politics has gotten gross. But can I just say, and I think I'm being objective here. Your mileage may vary. Objectively, I think Joe Biden has now had, 3 months? October, November, December? Really, September, October, November? He's had 3 full months minimum to prepare for this line of questioning. He's had 3 full months minimum to prepare for this line of questioning, and he can't do it. He can't answer it. He can't talk about it. He can't engage with it without getting mad. And I understand the protectiveness, the willingness to protect his son. I get that, particularly given his son's battles with his own demons. I get the protective nature of a dad wanting to protect his son. But Joe Biden is running to be president of the United States, and he can't answer questions about his son without getting defensive. And there's a reason for that you need to understand. It is because Americans intuitively understand that when a president has a son, or when a vice president has a son who is getting wealthy off his dad's time in office, it reflects poorly on the father. And Biden, as vice president, had a son who was doing these things. And his son already gave an interview where he said he told his dad what was going on. And Joe Biden has said his aides did not tell him it was wrong. Why do you need to be told that it's wrong? Listen, if my son, I'm on radio statewide in Georgia. If my son were to go out to businesses in Georgia and try to recruit them as clients, if they had business before the legislature, and say, I'm not going to lobby for you, you put me on your payroll, and my dad's going to talk you up on the radio, and all the state legislature listens, that would be wrong. Now, my kid's just turned 11 yesterday, so it's not going to happen. But if he did, that would be wrong. If I had a child who went out and told businesses, put me on your payroll and I'm going to talk you up to my dad so that you get favorable treatment by my dad because you're taking care of me, it may not be criminal, but it would be wrong. The Democrats are making a case that the president needs to be impeached largely because he did nothing criminal, but he did something wrong. He did something that was abusive in office. He did something that was an abusive office. He did something that no president should do, and that any reasonable person should recognize no president should do, and that in so doing he was securing for himself and his family personal gain. That's what Hunter Biden did. He didn't do anything criminal. There's no allegation that Hunter Biden did anything criminal. What he did is he traded on his father's name to enrich himself, and there are allegations, in fact, that he talked up these companies that were paying him to his father, to whether or not they actually got favorable treatment, to attempt to get them favorable treatment. There's no evidence they got favorable treatment because they were paying Hunter Biden. But the Democrats want to impeach the president for doing abusive, unethical things that were not illegal. And they want to ignore the Joe Biden stuff. The president of the United States is not going to ignore this. And this, I think, is the thing. Just take this away from this conversation. The Democrats impeaching President Trump ensure that the Hunter Biden stuff is going to be a big issue next year on the campaign trail. And the fact that Joe Biden has had 3 months minimum to prepare for answers to the questions and can't do it without getting combative does not bode well for the Democrats.
Erick Erickson gives you the information you need and the truth you demand. For daily in-depth news and analysis.
If you weren't here in the first hour, I did say I thought it was notable that after several months of Democrats claiming the president is operating concentration camps along the southern border, operating concentration camps is not one of the articles of impeachment. Yeah. So maybe there are no concentration camps at the southern. Actually, I put this on Twitter. I tweeted out, remarkable, the Democrats are not impeaching the president for operating concentration camps. I guess they're okay with them, or maybe they made it all up. And several Democrats have responded, well, it's comprehensive. They're going to impeach him on something. As opposed to, they've been lying to you. There is a stunning contrast in Washington today that I think is really amazing. The Democrats are actually going to hand the president significant legislative victories in the House of Representatives today. Everyone's so focused on impeachment today and the press conference and the articles of impeachment. And in fact, the Democrats are going to pass the USMCA, the revision with the Mexico-Canada, United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, and they're going to pass a Paid Family Leave Act that Ivanka Trump is one of. They're going to pass both of those things today while also impeaching the very same president who will sign those things into law. Will that make those measures illegitimate? They say this is an illegitimate president, and yet they're treating him as if he's legitimate. Reminds me of the Democrats here in Georgia treating Brian Kemp as some sort of illegitimate governor, and yet they're trying to curry favor with him on all sorts of things around the state. So, yes, Democrats will be passing USMCA. And I got to tell you, reminds me of the Everett Dirksen quote. Everett Dirksen was the Senate Republican leader. This is attributed to him by all sorts of people, but it has never actually been confirmed that he said it. It's one of my favorite quotes about American politics, though. There are two parties in Washington, D.C., the stupid party and the evil party. Every once in a while, the stupid party and the evil party get together and they do something that is both stupid and evil. And that's what the press calls a bipartisan accomplishment. There are two parties in Washington, D.C., the stupid party and the evil party. Every once in a while, the stupid party and the evil party get together and they do something that is both stupid and evil, and that's what the press calls a bipartisan accomplishment. Or today, they'll call it the USMCA and the Paid Family Leave Act. I'm philosophically opposed to the federal government mandating paid family leave. I'm sorry. I know it makes me a heartless jerk, but I'm philosophically opposed to the federal government mandating paid family leave. I think it is a nanny state big government program that drives up the cost to companies that then impacts their not only bottom line, but their ability to hire people. But that's okay. I'm in the minority. I realize it. You know, when I was a political consultant and would run candidates for office, I would always tell them, know when you think you're right and everyone else thinks you're wrong. Know when you're in the minority, but you think you're right, and understand that. So I can take a position, understand I'm in the minority, and still believe I'm right. But that should put in perspective how I go about talking about it. Now, I'm not running for office, so I can just be blunt with you. I think it's a terrible idea, and I realize I'm in the minority. Oh, we need to let the mommy stay home and raise the babies, and then go back to work. Here's the problem, though. You're in a high-profile job. You're an executive at a company, and you take paid family leave, and then you start complaining that they're bothering you at home. Well, you know what? You chose to be in a high executive position and make yourself an indispensable person. Don't be surprised when your Fortune 500 company decides you actually are an indispensable person and continues to bother you while you're on paid family leave time, whether you're a mama or a daddy. I saw somebody the other day complaining about this online, that they were on, it was a guy who was taking spousal leave after a newborn, and he was complaining that his company called every day to check in. His assistant was calling with things to get his feedback on, and he was complaining that he was on leave. I'm sorry, but you're the guy who wanted that promotion to get into that particular position where you're now relied on by an entire company for your judgment on things, and you want to take several months off with no communication with the office. You can't do that. No company can sustain itself that long if you do that. But I realize I'm in the minority and it makes me a bad guy, blah, blah, blah. When we come back, we need to talk about the Richard Jewell movie, please. It's getting all sorts of buzz out there, including from here in Georgia with the AJC. It is Erick Erickson here across the state of Georgia. I want to shift gears away from impeachment and the like. And we'll get back to that. We'll take your phone calls as well, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. But I want to spend a moment on the Richard Jewell movie, and I want to be a little, I want to be... exercise some discretion in how I talk about it, and I'll be upfront and in full disclosure with you. I do an evening radio show on WSB in Atlanta, and it is owned by the Cox Media Group, and our flagship station for this show as well is WGAU in Athens, where my show comes from to the rest of you. It is also owned by Cox, and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution is owned by Cox. So it is a sister media outlet to the outlets that pay my bills. So I want you to know all of that as far as conflicts of interest disclosure and everything else going into this. Clint Eastwood has a new movie coming out, Richard Jewell. It is about Richard Jewell, the hero of the 1996 Olympics. For those of you unfamiliar with the story, in 1996, a man planted a bomb at Centennial Olympic Park. And Richard Jewell was the Eric Robert Rudolph, is that it? He hid out in the mountains forever. He was captured in 2005. He had also blown up an abortion clinic or some such, killed an abortion doctor. But Richard Jewell was the security guard at Centennial Olympic Park during the bombing, and he saw the backpack in which the bomb was and called it in and began getting people out of the area. I think 1 or 2 people were killed. A number of people injured, but Richard Jewell was a certifiable, genuine hero. He saw the bomb, did exactly what his training called him to do, and got people out of the way. Now, Richard Jewell was not a police officer. He worked as an independent contractor, I believe, through a security firm, and had idolized police and law enforcement, and that became an issue. And there were some within the FBI and the media who suspected that Jewell had manufactured the bomb in order to make himself a hero and to gain exposure and notoriety. And there were many news outlets that ran the details of what the FBI suspected, including at the AJC. And the Richard Jewell wound up suing them all. The case against the AJC went on until Jewell ultimately died of a heart condition. And a lot of his cases were dismissed, including, I think, the AJC case wound up ultimately going nowhere for him. But he was ultimately vindicated and declared a hero by multiple outlets and people. He was redeemed. But in getting Richard Jewell to that point, it is flat out undeniable that media outlets savaged Richard Jewell's reputation. And frankly, I don't think it is disputed that local media outlets in Georgia also played a role in casting doubts on Richard Jewell. And reporters will tell you, and they will argue until they're blue in the face, that they weren't actually casting doubt on Richard Jewell, that the FBI had suspicions about Jewell, and they were just reporting that. Well, in the movie, the Richard Jewell movie, there is an AJC reporter who is featured. She's played by Olivia Wilde, and the actual reporter is now deceased. And there is a suggestion that she had sexual relations with the FBI agent, and that's how she got the information. Now, as it was originally portrayed, and this is, again, media outlets ran with this part of the story without having seen the movie. As it was originally portrayed, or as it was originally suggested in some media outlets, the movie shows this reporter having sex with the FBI agent, and the FBI agent telling her that Richard Jewell is the chief suspect, which she runs with, and it begins the spiraling out of control of what happened with Richard Jewell. Now, actually, what the movie shows, according to those who have now seen the movie, is that she suggests that they should sleep with each other, but you don't actually see that on camera. It is a suggestion made, and ironically, many of the media outlets that have gone just dialed it up to 11 on a 10-point scale of outrage over Clint Eastwood made their initial claims that Clint Eastwood is going to portray this reporter as sleeping with the FBI agent to get sourcing information. The movie, according to the Hollywood Reporter, does not actually show that. The movie just says there's a suggestion that maybe this happened. That the reporter says, when are we going to sleep with each other or have sex or whatever. I'm trying to be delicate here. There may be kids in the car with you or wherever you are listening. But so it seems like some of the initial reporting from some of the initial news outlets got it wrong as to what the movie actually depicts. But there is a suggestion in the movie that maybe she did this. I got to tell you, the movie ends with a disclaimer. The AJC, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and Cox Enterprises is demanding a disclaimer to make it very clear that there is no evidence that their reporter slept with an FBI agent to get information. The movie actually has a disclaimer at the end of it that says that there are the history is true. What the story depicted is true, but that there are certain things within the movie that are not true, or to make the movie. And that's not good enough for the AJC, understandably so. Here's where I come down on this, and why I think this is something that we all do need to pay some attention to. It is interesting to me to see the media out now demanding clarification, demanding disclaimer, and demanding information that rights perceived wrongs about the Clint Eastwood movie that they haven't seen without seeing the movie. And it is much the same media that indisputably maligned Richard Jewell. That being said, I don't think maligning a dead reporter to tell a story is the right thing to do. I don't think that attacking this reporter and making it seem like she did sleep with an FBI agent to get information is a good decision by Clint Eastwood. Let me read you part of the Deadline reporting. Marty Singer, who is a lawyer representing Cox Enterprises and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, sent a letter and said it is highly ironic that a film purporting to tell a tragic story of how the reputation of an FBI suspect was grievously tarnished appears bent on a path to severely tarnish the reputation of the AJC, a newspaper with a respected 150-year-old publishing legacy. Fueled by controversy the past 2 weeks over the film's depiction of the Olivia Wilde portrayed Kathy Scruggs allegedly trading sex with an FBI agent for information that security guard Jewell was their lead suspect in the 1996 Atlanta Olympics bombing, the correspondence sent today makes no bones about the next step being defamation lawsuit in various jurisdictions against Clint Eastwood and Warner Brothers. Now, Warner Brothers is doubling down on this and saying they are prepared to fight this lawsuit against filed by the AJC. They call it baseless. This is also from Deadline. Warner Brothers is more than willing to take on the newspaper, according to this report. A studio source confirmed to Deadline that there has always been a disclaimer in the movie that reads, the disclaimer at the end of the film is, the film is based on actual historic events. Dialogue and certain events and characters contained in the film were created for the purpose of dramatization. The scene apparently in the movie, by those who have seen it, does not show that that Ms. Scruggs slept with an FBI agent, but instead have her in conversation with the FBI agent. Here's the deadline paragraph here, relevant paragraph. While not explicitly showing anything, there is a scene in the film in which Wilde's character Scruggs basically asks an FBI source where they're going to have sex after getting insider information on the bombing investigation by the Bureau. What the media did to Richard Jewell was wrong. It was a feeding frenzy. And Clint Eastwood has been on a roll with a lot of movies of late. His hero series, as some people are calling it, or anti-hero series, as some people are calling it, where he chronicles people who I guess you could call them anti-heroes, non-traditional heroes, where I mean, even the Mule, he plays. I mean, he plays real people. He plays or people who are based on real people, like in the Mule. Earl Stone. He does American Sniper. He does The Trouble with the Curve. Gran Torino. This history of movies where he's been putting out these movies, just they're iconic movies. I mean, just listen to the last line of movies that he's done. These are, it starts with American Sniper, and then there is Sully, and then there's the 1517 to Paris, and then there's The Mule, and now there's Richard Jewell. And he chronicles a number of people who they have interesting stories, were oftentimes maligned in the press or were mischaracterized in the press or misunderstood by the press. And Clint Eastwood has sought to tell a compelling story that gets their story right. In Richard Jewell's case, it was, yes, the FBI was concerned about Richard Jewell, and he fit a profile of someone who, because of his infatuation with the law enforcement, maybe, just maybe, he was a suspect. Now, in truth, the FBI treats everyone as a suspect. And in truth, the FBI quickly dismissed him, but the media continued to portray him as a suspect. In October of 1996, the U.S. Attorney Ken Alexander sent Richard Jewell a letter formally clearing him, stating that based on the evidence developed to date, Richard Jewell is not considered a target of the federal criminal investigation into the bombing on July 27, 1996 at Centennial Olympic Park. He was never charged. The FBI certainly searched his home. They questioned associates. They were ruling everyone out. And Jewell, because he found the bomb and fit a profile of someone who wanted media attention for being a hero, fit the profile. But he was actually a hero. Here's the thing, though. I think Kevin Riley and the AJC have merit to their argument that you should not portray a journalist as sleeping with someone for sourcing information just to sex up a movie. When you are essentially, in order to redeem Richard Jewell, maligning someone else unfairly. There's no evidence that she even suggested that she and the FBI agent should sleep together. This is a real reporter. This is a real woman with a real family, and she is now dead too. She is no longer here to defend herself, and Richard Jewell is no longer here to defend himself. And I really do think it's bad form for this movie. And I see people saying, oh, it's really rich for the media to be coming after all this stuff. Look what they did to Richard Jewell. And I'm in that camp. But I also think it's really rich of a movie to try to defend and rehabilitate the character and honor of a man, in part by tearing down the character of someone else who was just doing her job as a reporter, who in her reporting was actually covering that the FBI really did believe he was potentially the bomber. Richard Jewell got a terrible rap. He was so terribly maligned. He was ostracized. His life was ruined for a period of time. It was hard on him. It was hard on his mother. It was hard on his friends. But what about Kathy Scruggs, who many people are going to watch the movie and they're going to say, oh, well, this is just a fictional character concocted to tell the story. No, she was a real person. She had a real family. She lost a battle with cancer. And I wish that Clint Eastwood had chosen differently. Now, I don't think that the AJC suit can... There was a suggestion in conversation in a dramatization. I don't think they have a basis for the lawsuit, but I got to say, I understand their outrage over this. And I don't think that we need to play tit for tat. We don't need to say, well, they did it to Richard Jewell. Turnabout's fair play. No, Turnabout's not fair play. This isn't grade school. This isn't kindergarten. I intend to see this movie. It is getting incredible reviews in early releases. It is a story that should be told. But I will go into it understanding that in redeeming Richard Jewell, they made a decision. Clint Eastwood made a decision to sex it up a little bit with a reporter, and it maligns the character of a woman who is now dead and can't defend herself. And there's going to be a little bit of irony in the movie, maligning someone to redeem someone who had himself been maligned. And I think that's unfortunate, and they could have done something differently.
Erick Erickson wades through the fake news to give you the real news. It's honest news.
I have decided I am going to send out a sugar cookie recipe. It's perfect in time for that. You've all got Christmas parties coming up. I sent out the ginger cookie recipe, which I got great feedback on that one. I'm going to send out the sugar cookie recipe now, and it's easy to make. And it's highly, highly addictive. I actually do need to warn you about this cookie recipe. My mother-in-law made them, and I think I ate them all in one sitting, like 24 cookies, and got sick. They were that good. I know, and I'm fat, so I shouldn't have. It's a really good recipe. So if you want the recipe, text the word recipe to 33777, and I will send it out tomorrow. I got to find it. It's written on a note card, and I got to type it out for you. I don't even have. So I keep a program on my computer called Paprika. And it's an app on my phone and my laptop and my iPad, and it syncs all of my recipes together. It's a great cooking app. By the way, someone asked me, and I guess I need to do this, and I'll send it out on the recipe list, GIF recommendations for people. I will tell you, it is expensive. But my latest and greatest toy in the kitchen that I have enjoyed, and it's not really in the kitchen, it's on the back porch, that I thoroughly enjoy. And having had multiple different ones, the Rock Box is a keeper. ROCCBOX. I'll put a link in the recipe email. Text recipe to 33777. It is an outdoor pizza oven, and it is portable. It weighs a ton, but it is small. You can make a 12-inch pizza in it. This is all the latest craze. In fact, I was at Sur La Table at Phipps Plaza in Atlanta on Saturday, and they had one in there, not a Rock Box, but a different little outdoor pizza oven, and they had a different variety at Williams-Sonoma, and I have owned one of those, and they're crap. They don't retain heat well. It takes them. They don't heat up well. They don't retain heat well. The Rock Box is the best. It's actually made in England, and you can get them at Williams-Sonoma. In fact, I impressed Rick Perry, the Secretary of Energy, so much with mine that he went out and bought one for him and his wife. You can make a 12-inch Neapolitan-style pizza in this oven. You can roast a chicken. I've roasted a chicken in this thing, too. It gets up to 900 degrees Fahrenheit. I roasted a whole chicken. You had to spatchcock it, though, to fit it in because the opening isn't very high. That's where you cut out the backbone and you flatten the chicken. I roasted one in this oven, and it took maybe 30 minutes in this oven. I didn't turn it all the way up to 900 degrees Fahrenheit, but I got it up pretty high. You stick the legs towards the back, and the bone from the leg burns to a crisp. But the rest of the chicken cooks just perfectly. It stayed juicy. It was moist. It was incredible. I've done pizza in it. I've cooked shrimp in it. I've cooked chicken in it. It's great. It's called Rock Box, ROCCBOX. Now, it's like $500, full disclosure. But you can do either wood burning or gas. With a Neapolitan pizza, you're only allowed 4 ingredients: flour, salt, water, and yeast. Flour, salt, water, yeast. Yep, that's it. 4 ingredients for Neapolitan pizza. That's all you're allowed to put in it. And it's got to be baked in less than 2 minutes with buffalo mozzarella and San Marzano tomatoes and basil in a wood-burning oven that gets up to 900 degrees Fahrenheit. And you can do that in a Rock Box. You can get authentic Neapolitan-style pizzas in the Rock Box. And in most of these other outdoor pizza oven things, you can't. I highly recommend it if you're interested in if you want to add to an outdoor pizza, outdoor kitchen, get the Rock Box. When we come back, we got to move on to Fox News, bringing in Bill Hemmer to replace Chef Smith. Why, hello there. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here across the state of Georgia. The phone number, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Inc.com is reporting this right now, happening now. If you have an Amazon Echo or Google Home, the FBI has some urgent advice for you. The temptation to get a machine to turn your lights on for you is very strong. It makes you feel masterful and saves you from having to get up from the sofa. There's a tiny catch about Internet of Things devices, however. They may not be entirely secure. Don't take my word for it. For devices like Amazon Echo and Google Home, they're the subject of a tech warning from the FBI. The FBI has released a slightly nerve-affecting warning. Here's what the FBI says. Digital assistants, smartwatches, fitness trackers, home security devices, thermostats, refrigerators. I'm half Cajun, half Swedish. Don't blame me. Refrigerators and even light bulbs are all on the list. Add to that all the fun stuff. Remote-controlled robots, games, gaming systems, interactive dolls, talking stuffed animals. The list seems endless. Hackers can use these innocent devices to do a virtual drive-by of your digital life. Unsecured devices can allow hackers a path into your router, giving the bad guy access to everything else in your home network that you thought was secure. Are private pictures and passwords safely stored on your computer? Don't be so sure. Change the device's factory settings from the default password. A simple internet search should tell you how, and if you can't find that information, consider moving on to another product. Many connected devices are supported by mobile apps on your phone. These apps could be running in the background and using default permissions that you never realized you approved. Know what kind of personal information these apps are collecting and say no to privilege requests that make no sense. Secure your network. Your fridge and your laptop should not be on the same network. Keep your most private sensitive data on a separate system from your other IoT devices. IoT is Internet of Things. You know, I've been having this conversation with my friends about the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things is the things in your house that are randomly connected to the internet, and it seems like there are groups out there now that try to find every which way to connect everything in your house to the internet. So I have a Christmas present coming today, and of all things, it is a toaster oven. Those of you who know me understand that this like gets in the Venn diagram of things I'm interested in. It is right smack in the center. It is called the June oven. And it is an oven that is an Internet of Things device. It is connected to the internet, and it learns. It has a camera in the oven. So you put a bacon in the oven, and the camera recognizes you've put bacon in the oven. And so all you do is say you want it crispy, or my son likes bacon that is grossly limp. When we go to Waffle House, he orders limp bacon. We used to order bacon that was floppy like a fish, because that would be, when he was little, how he would describe how he liked it. And at Waffle House, they call that limp bacon. So you get limp bacon. I want the Viagra bacon. I want the bacon that is hard and crispy and is delicious. He wants the bacon that is floppy and in need of Cialis or something. Limp bacon sounds gross. It is gross, and he loves it. And seriously, I'm not making this up. He eats 3 pieces of cold limp bacon every day at school. There's something. I love my son, but I was a picky eater when I was a kid. Seriously, we grew up in Dubai, and we would travel abroad, and my mother would keep Heinz ketchup in her purse. Our very first trip abroad, we lived in Dubai, and we went to Cyprus. We went to the island of Cyprus. My mother wanted to see where St. Paul had been on the island, and we went to the island. Abby just heard the Viagra bacon. Seriously, though. The kid. So we go to Cyprus. I guess I'm 5 or 6. We're on the island of Cyprus, and I won't eat anything because in Europe, those of you who've never been to Europe, they will oftentimes dilute ketchup with vinegar. And so it's a very, very, and I realize there's vinegar in ketchup, but it's like really vinegar. It's like tomato vinegar. It's disgusting. And I wouldn't eat anything. I was starving on this island. island. So my mother would have to carry Heinz ketchup everywhere we went. We went to a Chinese restaurant. The very first place I ever had sweet and sour shrimp was a Chinese restaurant on the island of Cyprus. There is your worlds colliding. And I ate my sweet and sour shrimp with Heinz ketchup in this Chinese restaurant that we had befriended a taxi cab driver named George. And George lived with his sister. They were goat herders. They would make goat cheese, and George drove a taxi, and he drove us all over the island where we could go because it was divided between the Turks and the Cypriots. But anyway, George had to take us to the grocery store to get an unopened bottle of Heinz ketchup so that I could eat on the island. And I am a picky eater. My son, however, puts me to shame. He eats floppy like a fish, limp bacon. He eats chicken nuggets. He'll eat home chicken nuggets. He'll eat chicken nuggets from Chick-fil-A. He'll eat chicken nuggets from not the Burger King by our house, but by another Burger King. And he'll eat chicken nuggets from McDonald's. He'll eat peanut butter and jelly toast. And he will eat pepperoni pizza, but he wants the pepperoni pulled off, and he eats the pepperoni separate from the pizza. And cheese sticks from some restaurants, but not others. That's about the extent of my son's diet, and our pediatrician says he'll grow out of it. In fact, there's hope. He has just now begun sampling cheeseburgers, and he has decided he likes the cheeseburger from Five Guys. But really, that's cover for the French fries. He wants the French fries from Five Guys, and I cannot believe I'm doing an entire monologue on Viagra bacon and my son's eating habits. But he wants floppy like a fish bacon. So anyway, in this June oven that I'm getting, it may actually be, there's a big box that FedEx has put. I have a window in my studio at home, and I can see there's a box out. That may be it. Don't come by yet and rob me. You can put in the bacon and say, hey, I want crispy bacon, or I want limp bacon, or non-crispy bacon, I think. And it'll do it. You don't even have to set the temperature or anything. You just push. The camera says, hey, you got bacon? You say, yep. And it says, do you want it crispy, or do you want it floppy like a fish? And you pop it in, and it says, oh, you got 5 strips of bacon, and it'll cook 5 strips of bacon different from 1 strip of bacon. It's impressive. I can't wait for this thing. We use a regular toaster in our house. My wife's been wanting a toaster oven, and I couldn't find a good toaster oven, and Cooks Illustrated recommends the June oven as like its favorite toaster oven, smart or not smart. So I figure, hey, what the heck, I'll get it. It was on sale, so I would get it. But it's an Internet of Things device, and so it connects via Wi-Fi to June, and it constantly gets new updates. So every once in a while you get a software update, and suddenly your June oven does new stuff, which is kind of cool, actually. You can dehydrate stuff. It's now an air fryer as well. It does all sorts of stuff. But I get the reason for an Internet of Things toaster oven, but why do you need your refrigerator connected to the internet? I think it's Samsung has an internet connected refrigerator. Why? Why does your oven need to be connected to the internet unless it's like this June thing and has a camera and it cooks itself or whatever you put in it? Why does your oven need an Internet of Things device? Or have you heard about the Ring doorbells? Many of you people have Ring doorbells. And a hacking group has hacked into the Ring database and can see where all the Ring doorbells are now, and can see the footage off the Ring doorbells, and can listen to the microphones or something. There was an article yesterday about how the Ring microphones and the Ring cameras, they're sharing information with the police, whether you consent or not, if you use the Neighbors app. So I use, just let me cut to the chase and give you a solution on all of this. If you have an Apple device, your Apple device, you don't have to worry about it. Siri is not listening to you like your Amazon Alexa or your Google HomePod. Apple wanted to do home devices, Internet of Things devices. We've got light switches like the Philips Hue stuff in our house. So our lights turn on at sunset. We got our Christmas lights on Apple's HomeKit. So you can, our lights turn on and turn off. I can tell, I've got it called Holidays. So I can say, hey, Dingus, I'm not going to say the other because it may activate your device. Hey, Dingus, turn on the Holidays. And all of a sudden, the Christmas tree comes on, the wreath comes on, the little dude outside, the Nutcracker guy, he starts banging the drum, and then the inflatable teddy bear Santa Claus pops up out of the ground and inflates, and it's awesome. And then I can say, hey, Dingus, turn off the Holidays, or I can set it on remote. We've got it set up so in the morning when the alarm clock goes off, Siri knows, turn on the lights downstairs, start the coffee pot. It's fantastic. fantastic. I love it. But I wouldn't do it with Alexa or with Google because they're not secure. The reason I use the Apple HomeKit stuff is that it's very secure, and it's a pain in the butt to get the devices installed, unlike the other devices, because there's an extra security layer so hackers can't get in and start controlling your lights. And most people don't realize that unless you're using Apple's HomeKit with the extra security layer, every HomeKit device has that's why Apple is slow rolling this stuff out. Because every HomeKit device has a little chip in it for security. The other stuff doesn't, which is why there's so much more of it. It's less expensive. It's easier to get set up. It's easier to use, but it's also way less secure. And hackers are hacking into this stuff. So if you got Internet of Things devices, I have no idea why we need Internet of Things devices. There was an article, y'all, maybe I shouldn't be talking about this one. There was an article in, what is that website? Not Engadget. What's the unserious for Gizmodo? Gizmodo was owned by the Gawker people. I forget who owns it now, Huffington Post or some such. But they were talking about an internet connected pleasuring device. Let's just leave it like that. We've already referenced Viagra Bacon, so we'll just say it was an internet connected device for pleasure. I don't know why. I don't understand. What if the hackers hacked that? You could get electrocuted and somebody's going to find your body and say, how'd that person die? Died of a good time, I guess. I just... Well, I have no idea. I mean, people want to put the internet in everything today. I'm turning red-faced, and I haven't said anything that should embarrass me, have I? I don't understand this. And so now the FBI, if you're wondering what this is all a roundabout, circuitous way of referencing, the FBI has come out with this warning today saying increasingly hackers are hacking people's stuff, and you don't even know it. They're surveilling you. Now, to bring this full circle and to have something that's more grown up and less embarrassing, this goes to the New York Times story that, so there are two stories. The New York Times story on kids being put into compromising positions through the internet, and there's the Washington Post story about the Afghanistan papers revealing the amount of lying that's gone on in the Pentagon across multiple administrations about Afghanistan. And the impeachment stuff is just going to bury both of those stories out of the headlines. But to put this Internet of Things story and this FBI warning that's come out today in proper perspective, consider this, people. Seriously, grown-up story here. I had to have this discussion with my 11-year-old yesterday because he's big on Fortnite. There are people who are hacking the cameras in your PlayStations and Xboxes, in your tablet devices, non-Apple tablets. Very hard to, again, Apple is big on building their own devices because they put in physical chips. And it makes it very hard to turn on remotely the camera in your iPad. But if you've got an Android tablet or an Android phone, hackers have figured out easy ways to hack into those and activate the cameras on your laptops and your tablets, on your games. And the New York Times had this very serious story over the weekend about people reaching out to kids through Fortnite, through Minecraft, and through other things, and saying, I've got compromising pictures of you. I hacked your camera. And I know who your friends are on your device. And I'm going to send your friends all of these embarrassing pictures of you unless you send me naked photos of yourself. And thankfully, in some cases, the parents figured out what was going on and caught it before the kids decided to do that. But there were several cases where kids had essentially descended into an abusive relationship with an anonymous person over the internet because those people had either hacked devices and were spying on the kids, or more commonly, what is most common, is they befriended the kids in these first-person shooter games that are played over the internet, built up trust with the kid, and then started making claims to the kid that they had hacked. And in some cases they hadn't, and in a couple of cases I believe they had hacked devices. In most cases they hadn't, but they had built up trust with the kid and then turned on the kid, and the kid really did believe them when they said they had these incriminating pictures and they were going to embarrass them with their friends and whatnot. It is a dangerous thing, and increasingly we're seeing unscrupulous people get into these devices and hack these devices, and you do need to be careful. Now, let me close this out with this point. Many of you, like me, probably, if you are in the least bit tech savvy, have probably purchased some of these for your elderly parents because you recognize the convenience of your parent being able to say, "Hey, Dingus, turn on my lights," or "Hey, Dingus, call my daughter because I fallen on the floor," or something. You need to make sure their devices are secure because they're going to get hacked, their information is going to get compromised, and the hacker's going to know they're old and they're not going to come through their Amazon device or their Google device. They're going to come through the phone, and they're going to pretend they know the person, and they're going to raid that person's bank account. And so get serious and understand, if you have these internet devices in your house, if you're getting them for Christmas, be mindful of this. I was at the bank the other day, and they were like, no, this is a while back. I was at the bank, and there was an elderly woman in there whose grandson had taken all of her money out of her checking account without her permission. And it was the woman's preacher there with her demanding the bank make her right. And that's happening within a family, and it happens every day across this country. Elder abuse, kids taking advantage of older parents and grandparents, and it's increasingly happening with these Internet of Things devices. I'm not telling you they're bad and that you shouldn't take them out of your house. I would be a hypocrite if I did, because I got a lot of them in my house. But just be mindful that they're there and the capabilities that a stranger can get a hold of them and use. And also, eat crispy bacon. Don't eat limp bacon.
Erick Erickson gives you the information you need and the truth you demand. Weekly recipes? Text RECIPE to 33777 now.
It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you want to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Charlie says I was too rambling and didn't get to the point of the last monologue, and I should apologize to everyone for wasting your time to wait for the end of the monologue to tie it all together and get to the point. You know, most people are their own chief critic. Not with me. Nope. I've got my wife and Charlie to keep me humble. Now he's going to text me angrily. I have to give him a hard time to keep him humble. My buddy Dan McLaughlin, Baseball Crank on Twitter, writes for National Review, and he's got a series of tweets I want to read for you very quickly. I can't read that text. I can't read that text now. He's dropping bad words at me. I never said that, he says. Whatever. Okay. Dan McLaughlin writes, legal merits aside, spending years accusing Donald Trump of treason, bribery, and collusion, and then impeaching him for none of those things, but including an article on obstruction of Congress as one of the two charges, seems like disastrously inside Beltway politics. I do not see how abuse of power and obstruction of Congress is a better idea for selling this to the public than abuse of power. But then several of the articles against Andrew Johnson never even came to a vote once the strongest charge failed. The obstruction count does not include any charge of perjury, witness tampering, anything like that. It's literally just you refuse to cooperate with our investigation of you. Knowing you lack the votes in the Senate, why include this? Who is the man in the street audience? Let's face it, a lot of people feel that Trump was elected basically to give Congress the finger, and Trump has no obligation to help anybody investigate him. I don't endorse those sentiments, but this is not the hill to die on. If I was a Democrat, I'd likely support impeaching Trump precisely because impeachment under these circumstances is an exercise in political messaging. The House can, if it likes, use impeachment to make a case of presidential unfitness ahead of an election, but then sell it. Not one vote is going to change to Trump's detriment next November by accusing Trump of refusing to help Congress remove him from office. I just don't see the political rationale. He's right. The fact that they dodged the Mueller situation altogether, the fact that they still have left hanging the issue of who the whistleblower is, it's actually pretty telling, pretty staggering. This really is about setting the stage for November. It is not about actually getting the president out of office. If it was getting the president out of office, they would actually impeach him for all the things they've spent the last several months complaining about, bribery, witness tampering, and the like. None of that is in the impeachment articles. None of that is. The president has largely been his own worst enemy and has been protected by a great many people around him who did not do what he wanted them to do. But there is one other thing as well. The President of the United States also has the Democrats on the other side, and they keep screwing things up. The president is blessed by enemies as incompetent as the Democrats
15.
when it comes to stuff like this. It makes no sense that they've done what they've done. It really doesn't, and yet that's the road they're going to go down. All these irons in the fire all of a sudden. Welcome back. Sorry, I'm having to respond to a kind of time-sensitive email all of a sudden. The phone number here, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. You know what? No. You do need to know that Stacey Abrams has just declared that she would be willing to be the vice presidential nominee, that it would not quash her ambitions. Being a Georgia show for people in Georgia, broadcasting from Georgia, let me spend just a moment on this with Stacey Abrams. And I haven't wanted to talk about Abrams a lot. There have been stories out there, a lot of people attacking her, for example, over a film deal she got. God bless her for it. She's a novelist. She's an accomplished novelist, actually. It may not be my cup of tea or yours, but she's had success in novels, and some of those now are possibly going to be adapted into movies. I would say, inarguably, it is because of her notoriety now as a candidate, whether she won or lost as a candidate for office, who galvanized people on the left, a lot of whom are in Hollywood, but God bless her for making a living with it. I don't fault her for that at all. I see conservatives blowing up Barack Obama, saying he's somewhat hypocritical for buying a multi-million-dollar house on Martha's Island. God bless him for it. He's made a lot of money. Enjoy it now. He's no longer president of the United States. You can stop hating him. You can say he blew up millionaires and billionaires and blasted people for getting rich off office. He got rich off book deals and TV deals and Netflix. And you may not like it. You may think it's hypocritical, but I don't care. I got too much time. I got not enough time in the day to be outraged by everything. I applaud everyone being successful. It is one more person who is going to stand up to Elizabeth Warren once they're successful, knowing Elizabeth Warren's going to come get them in their money. And in fact, Barack Obama has now been coming out and said, hey, I don't think we need to go down this road. Good for him. If Stacey Abrams wants to make money, God bless her. I got to tell you, and I continue to maintain this, Stacey, I know everyone gets mad at me. I've been asked not to say this on radio. I really have. I had a friend of mine say I shouldn't say this on radio. It could be harmful for my career as a conservative talk show host to say this. But I tend to like most people, even when I disagree with them. And I thought that I interviewed every single person running for governor of Georgia, Democrat and Republican. I interviewed every single one of them. I interviewed Brian Kemp, Michael Williams, Casey Cagle, Hunter Hill, Stacey Evans, Stacey Abrams. Who else was running for governor? There were other people running for governor, it seems like. In any event, I interviewed them all. And my two favorite interviews were Brian Kemp and Stacey Abrams. The reason that I liked Brian Kemp's interview when I interviewed him, they were hour-long interviews for each of them. The reason I liked Brian Kemp, his was actually the first interview, is Brian Kemp just did not care. And I liked that. Now, I maybe I shouldn't put it that way. He was just laid back. He was there to run for governor, but he was going to tell you what he thought, matter-of-factly. He was just going to tell you. He came in jeans and boots, wore a dress shirt and a blazer, but jeans and boots. Most everybody else came in suits, and most everybody else sat on the edge of their chair as if that I was going to ask them the most game-changing question. He just laid back in the chair, kicked out his legs, and we had a great conversation and just about life and politics and policies and who he was and where he came from. And he was a genuine human being. And I like those sorts of politicians. Those are increasingly unique in American life. You need to understand that in American politics these days, people who are politicians tend to have come from birth in a three-piece suit, ready to answer all of your questions as nebulously as possible, lest they be forced to take a position on something. Not Brian Kemp. He came out, here's what he believes. You don't like it, we can be friends. We're just going to disagree on this. Stacey Abrams was very much the same way. She came in to a conservative talk show host with a reputation of being a conservative political activist who she knew was never going to vote for her, and sat down and we had a fantastic conversation about her growing up, about her life. And here's the thing that I have continued to appreciate about her, and it is the thing that is consistent about her. And I know it pains people to hear me say something nice about Stacey Abrams. She's funny. She can laugh at herself. It is one thing for a politician in America to be able to laugh at someone else. It is a rare politician to be able to laugh at themselves. You would be surprised at the number of politicians who will not make a joke at their own expense. And she made lots of jokes at her expense, and I found it endearing because I've been around enough politicians and have done enough interviews over the last 20 years that I can tell when someone really believes what they're saying and is authentic about it and is willing to open up and be vulnerable in public. And she was, and Brian Kemp was, and they were unique in that regard. They were willing to crack jokes on themselves. They were willing to be open. They were willing to be vulnerable. They were willing to say they didn't have all the answers. That was another thing that struck me. Comparing, and I don't want to go into attacking other candidates, but I interviewed other candidates, Democrat and Republican, who could not bring themselves to utter 3 words. Those 3 words were, I don't know. Abrams and Kemp were willing to. And I find it refreshing when a candidate, whether I agree with them or not, is willing to say, you know what, I don't have all the answers. Now, as to the answer she had, she and I, we disagreed on all sorts of stuff. We found common ground on issues. And this is the thing that I find more and more, and this is why I'm very, very hesitant to ever call someone on the other side an enemy. They're just an opponent. There were a number of situations where she and I could look at a situation and say, objectively, this situation is bad, but we had different solutions. Her solution always involved the government, and oftentimes my solution would be leave it alone. It's a problem, but there's nothing the government should do about it. One of those issues is one of the latest concerns of Democrats nationwide is what they call a food desert. It is yet another moral crisis, and the Democrats have gotten really good at everything is a moral crisis. Climate change is a moral crisis. Income inequality is a moral crisis. Prison population is a moral crisis. Everything's a moral crisis. Food deserts are a moral crisis. You wonder, what is a food desert? It is a grocery store with sand? No. A food desert is where you live somewhere in Georgia and you have to drive a significant distance to get to a grocery store, or your access to fresh food is limited. That is a food desert. And there are food deserts in metro Atlanta, Georgia, around the old Turner Field that is now Georgia State. It is a walled-in, isolated expanse of interstate and projects, and there is not a grocery store anywhere near there. And if you are poor and of limited mobility because of your lack of access to transportation, you have a hard time going to anywhere other than the local Dairy Queen or Wendy's to get food, and that's not healthy. You have no access to fresh vegetables. The local corner grocery stores that you depend on don't have fresh vegetables. They have processed foods. And believe it or not, the scientific evidence does show that eating on the perimeter of the grocery store, the fresh fruits and vegetables, the fresh meats and the dairy is better for you than the processed foods. But you go to the little corner grocery store, you're going to get lots of processed foods, and maybe there's some milk that's not expired. That is a food desert. You move to rural Georgia. You may have an Ingles 30 minutes away from you, and that's the best you can do. Now, Stacey Abrams, you know what? I want to be hesitant because it's been a long time since we had the interview. But essentially, several Democrats have proposed either we've got to increase funding for rural transportation to get people to grocery stores, or we need to economically incentivize grocery stores moving into certain areas so people have access to it. That is a Democratic solution. I don't want to put words in Stacey Abrams' mouth. I think that was one of hers, was expanding transport in rural Georgia. Spending government money to expand transport in rural Georgia. What is my solution? My solution as a conservative is, yes, this is a problem, and believe it or not, there are long-term health impacts of people eating lots of processed food and no fresh food and not having access to it. But you know what? People make a choice to live in a rural area, and I see no reason that the government needs to get involved with taxpayer dollars to set up transportation systems that you may or may not use to get thee to the grocery store. And if anything, by setting up a system where you are relying on the government to transport you to a grocery store for you to do your grocery shopping, you are increasingly then unreliant on family, friends, church, and local community. And I personally think, as a conservative, one of the worst things our government has ever done in history is, in terms of societal impact overall, is to decrease people's dependence on local community structures, be they churches, civic groups, family, friends. You can now live your entire life suckling Uncle Sam's man boob and never have to rely on family, friends, or church again. And if that paints a horrible picture in your mind and you're going to have nightmares over it, I apologize, but it's the truth. We have way too many people who have become dependent on government in rural and urban areas, and as a result, we're seeing community breakdown because no one needs to be dependent on their community anymore. If everyone's dependent on Uncle Sam or the state of Georgia's taxpayer dollars to improve their existence, then they have no incentive to build a church community or a local civic community that replaces a church community, or keep their family close, or incentivize their family to play a part in their lives. We got a bunch of people who live in rural Georgia where their kids and relatives have packed up and left, and they have no network of friends or anyone else. They've become unplugged from church. And are they hurting? Yes. But the solution is not to have the government nanny come check on them and drive them to the grocery store. The solution is to help them build relationships within their local community. Incentivize that. Frankly, it's not even the government's role to do that. It's the role of local churches. But local churches have no incentive to do that because the government's already competing. So all of this is to say that Stacey Abrams and I, we can look at different issues and we can share a concern for the issue, but because she's on the left and I'm on the right, we arrive at different solutions. I would not vote for her. She would not vote for me. But that does not mean I can look at her and think that she's the enemy. No, she's just a political opponent. She and I disagree. I think that her policies would be harmful to the state of Georgia. She thinks my policies are harmful to the state of Georgia, but we can break bread together, and when we don't talk politics, enjoy each other's company. I would hope. We did on stage. We had a great conversation, and it was great to have someone who can laugh about themselves and the silly things their parents have done. Well, she's given this interview now, and she has said that she would be perfectly happy to be a vice presidential pick, that it would not diminish her ambition overall to be a vice presidential pick. I got to tell you, I have a hard time believing that anyone on the Democratic side would pick Stacey Abrams to be the vice president. Now, maybe if they want a wild card sensation, yes. But let's put this in perspective. And again, I don't mean disrespect here, and nobody get offended on the left now who might be listening. But Stacey Abrams was elected to a state house seat in Georgia and nothing else. Mike Pence has a deeper resume than Stacey Abrams when it comes to qualifications to be vice president. Tim Kaine on the Democratic side did. Joe Biden did. John Edwards did with John Kerry. Al Gore did with Bill Clinton. George H.W. Bush was probably the most qualified president and vice president in American history. Dick Cheney with George W. Bush was also highly qualified to be vice president. He had been a member of Congress. He had been a defense secretary. He had been a CEO of a major Fortune 500 corporation. Stacey Abrams rose to be a minority leader in a House of Representatives representing a small area of Georgia. That does not qualify one to be vice president. If you are to be vice president of the United States, the chief criteria for your job is that if the president keels over dead tomorrow, you could become president of the United States. In terms of rallying the base, perhaps Stacey Abrams is a legit pick. But in terms of persuading independent voters that you've made a reasonable pick who could become president of the United States, I don't know that that's the case. And then, frankly, there is a liability issue on the Stacey Abrams front for Democrats, and that is that she has taken some very progressive positions, including allowing illegal aliens to vote and things like that. And that, I think, would actually hurt the Democrats on the campaign trail when that stuff came out. There was a lot of opposition research that Brian Kemp did not use on Stacey Abrams that if she were the vice presidential pick would come out. I don't think it's going to happen. I do ultimately think that Stacey Abrams benefits by having this buzz about her because she very much wants a do-over. Whether she was or not, and I don't think she was, there was no voter suppression. In fact, I see people railing on this article where she says this, Jonathan Capehart from the Washington Post, saying, well, she can't win in Georgia. We need a vice president who can win. She can't win in Georgia because they'd suppress the vote in Georgia again. The mythology on the Democratic side that Stacey Abrams lost because of voter suppression as opposed to she just lost because there are more Republicans who turned out and voted for Brian Kemp. They really believe this. Even PolitiFact has come out and said there's no evidence of voter suppression. There's no evidence. In fact, there was a record black turnout in Georgia. There just happened to be a lot of Republicans who voted too. But if she was to become the vice presidential pick for the Democrats, there would be a vetting, and I don't know that it would go well ultimately because of her positions. And I got to tell you, you and Stacey Abrams and I, we can disagree on all sorts of stuff. And I think the Democrats would be making a mistake if she were the vice presidential pick, but I think the buzz helps her because she really wants to run against Brian Kemp again. She really does think that the race was stolen from her, even though I don't think it was. But you can say all that. You can take that position. You can ultimately arrive at, I disagree with this person, but she's actually a likable person. And I know it's heresy in this day and age to say stuff like that, but I continue to believe I got to say stuff like that because I got to remind you that just because you disagree with someone on politics in this country does not make that person your enemy. It may make them your next door neighbor who you just don't know what their political views are because you're much more interested in cheering on the Braves together. Which, if Stacey Abrams were vice president, we would have a vice president who cheered on the Braves.
Well connected and well respected.
Oof. How is impeachment playing over at CNN? This is Ross Garber, CNN's legal analyst on impeachment.
Ukrainian officials to American officials, and he's overstepped his bounds, including through tweets in the past week. So that conduct is not okay, and it's part of why I've been critical of what the Democrats have tried to do here. This is, I think, we're seeing not a real effort to remove the president. The Democrats, are moving these articles through. They know it has little or no shot of going anywhere in the Senate. And as you probably remember, for weeks or months, I've been saying, look, take a look at the actual issues here, do a real investigation. And this notion by Schiff that he didn't have time to go to court, I think is just nonsense. One of the reasons why the McGahn case has taken 8 months to play out is that the House didn't go to court right away. They issued the subpoena. They waited a long time to try to enforce it. They waited a long time to try to go to court. And so instead, we do have this rushed impeachment process, which is looking like a fast train to acquittal in the Senate.
Yeah, fast train to acquittal in the Senate. The Democrats themselves dragged their feet on this. We haven't heard from John Bolton, who said he was willing to testify if a judge gave the okay, and the Democrats did not pursue that in court. They didn't go after getting Russ Vogt from Office of Management and Budget to testify. They didn't go after Mick Mulvaney to get him to testify. There were so many people the Democrats did not get to testify, nor have we heard from the whistleblower. And again, I realize Democrats say there's no reason to hear from the whistleblower, but it was the Democrats themselves who said we were going to hear from the whistleblower. And then the news came out that the whistleblower had coordinated with Adam Schiff's office. And they don't want that guy to be under oath answering how long he coordinated, why he coordinated, and what he coordinated about. That's why they're not calling the whistleblower. It has nothing to do with him being revealed or not. That there is, we now pretty much know who the whistleblower is, but also there's no protection in the whistleblower statute from being identified. And the Democrats were adamant that we would hear from the whistleblower, that whistleblower, too, would appear in the secure room. No one would know who the whistleblower was. They would be able to do it. Republicans would be there, all of that. And then suddenly it came out that the whistleblower had coordinated with the Democrats. And then all of a sudden, no, we don't need to hear from the whistleblower. Well, of course not, because they don't want that they don't want him under oath answering Republican questions. Now, how's this playing out there? This is from MSNBC.
You're addressing me of being Hey there, Hallie. Exactly. So perhaps unsurprising after all these months of being at rallies and talking to the president's fiercest supporters who maintain that the president did nothing wrong, we caught up with them right after that press conference you referenced earlier and talked to them about their feelings of these two articles of impeachment. Folks basically were defiant and dismissed them, which is something we've heard time and time again. But the overarching theme has to do with exactly the reason we're here today in Hershey, and that is because of the president's re-election campaign. These supporters actually believe that the impeachment headlines from today will only harden his support heading into 2020. Take a listen to what a few of them told us ahead of the president's rally tonight.
They've been digging at this even before he was elected, so I think they're just grabbing for straws that aren't there.
You can see how upset I am. I'm telling you right now, there are people out here that are so enraged. We are so fed up. And so, of course, we're going to be stronger even coming back to vote for President Trump again.
Now, you know, here's the political fallout. Progressives have been rallying consistently against the president, but a lot of Republicans were stepping back, away, pulled out of politics, and I suspect we're going to see them fired up again for the president in a way they have not previously been, and I don't think that that's going to work the way the Democrats want, particularly when the president has a massive war chest to go after the Democrats, and they don't have the money to go after him. They're fighting each other right now.